Good morning and welcome to the regular public workshop meeting of the Henry County Board of Commissioners for 9 a.m. Monday, June the 4th, 2012. At this time, I'd like to call the meeting to order and ask for an acceptance of the agenda. Motion by Mr. Stamey and a second by Mr. Holmes. All in favor? Motion carries 5-0. The first item this morning is a discussion regarding the regulations related to amusement game rooms. Our presenter is Michael Harris, Planning and Zoning Services, and Major Chad Rossborough, Police Department. That's exhibit number 1. Good morning,
Chairman. Good morning, Chairman. Good morning, board members. Over the course of the last few months, staff has been working in conjunction with the police department specifically to address amusement game rooms. There's a number of them throughout Henry County, located typically within convenience stores. And in speaking with Major Rossborough and as well as with Chief Nichols, who's going to come up here in a minute as well, and give you some more examples, but they've had a number of incidences associated with these type of establishments. And in reviewing our ordinance, didn't have a real firm grasp on a set of regulations to properly regulate these type of facilities. So we've done some looking around, looked at some other jurisdictions. We found some, actually down in Warner Robins was probably one of the more comprehensive ordinance that we saw in place, and we've been reviewing those for the last few months to kind of come with some additional language we think should be amended and for consideration by the board. Again, let Major Rossborough kind of talk some issues that they've dealt with, but at the end of this, we just kind of will be asking the board for some direction on how you'd like us to proceed, be that we don't see that we have any real strong regulations in place right now, and to see what steps we should take to go forward. Major Rossborough.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
I know over the last 11 years that I've been in Henry County, we've constantly had issues with the cherry machines or the gambling machines in convenience stores and things like that. Either them being broken into in the machines by people in back rooms, where they generally put them in back rooms in convenience stores, or just by criminal activity going on with them, just paying out in cash, what they're not supposed to do in convenience stores, and mainly the game rooms, to where the only thing that's going on there is the gambling machines. And those are really our hot spots for, I know we've had a couple of armed robberies at these locations. We've made several drug sale cases at these locations, constantly get complaints about them. These locations, a lot of these locations you can't get in, the doors are locked. You have to have a so-called membership card to get in. And while doing some investigation, it's kind of found out it's kind of membership cards are kind of hit and miss to who they want to give one to, or who they're requiring to have one, whether they know you or not, is what it's boiling down to. So I know for us, the Drug Task Force, just over the past 7-8 years, and over the last year or so, respectively, is just a lot of criminal activity going on in these locations. Really, the game rooms themselves, they're not really operating within the law at all. And as far as state law goes, there's really not a whole lot we can do with them to try to solve the problem and get them out of the county.
Good morning.
Good morning, Chief.
How y'all doing? There's not a whole lot more than I can say than what Major Rossborough has already said, other than the fact that over the years, even going back to when I was over our drug unit, these complaints seem to be a constant and perpetuated. I can stand up here and give you many examples. One several years ago, we had a guy that we actually charged for burglary because he crawled up into the crawl space of a business because he had been playing the machine throughout the week that was located inside a convenience store and had lost about $800. And when the owner was closing up that night, he noticed that there was some ceiling tile debris on the floor, looked up, heard something moving. We responded, and ultimately the gentleman said that he was going to burglarize the business when it closed because he was going to get his money back one way or another. Several months ago, Fred brought to our attention he had a constituent that had basically lost quite a bit of money in one of these establishments. And the thing that gets me is there is state law that governs this, but it's very difficult to enforce because of all the stipulations that are in there. I have communicated back and forth with our state representatives about the difficulties that we have. One of those difficulties is that we would have to send an undercover officer into one of these establishments, gain some kind of acceptance, because normally they won't start paying off just right off the bat, and obviously we have to expend funds. So sometimes we've expended as much as $1,000 or more just to make a misdemeanor case. What I've noticed as time has went on, some of these individuals have gotten more and more bold, where they create an establishment that seems to be just for those purposes. In other words, there's tent over the windows, and like the Major said, you have to be buzzed in. So we're trying to, with this ordinance, we've looked at some agencies that have been successful in combating this at a local level, and this ordinance is a pretty good example of success, such as areas that a lot of convenience stores will have a back room. We bring those out and exposed, and there are some legitimate reasons that people can play these, but it really doesn't make a lot of sense, because if you're a convenience store owner, basically all you can do is maybe pay out in, store merchandise, something except for alcohol, tobacco, and I don't know if gas is included in there.
Gas is not included in that.
It's some kind of store coupons. So if you really look at it, if somebody's going to sit there and play these machines hour on hour, there's really not a lot of legal payoff. So that's why we've looked at this ordinance, and hopefully, like Mike said, you can give us some direction on this. But all in all, I've looked at it. Again, Warner Robins has been pretty successful, and I think Major Rossborough also has a acquaintance that is actually in the
Correct.
business of these game machines, the legitimate business of the game machines, and he's consulted with him also.
Correct.
Well, I noticed from the executive presentation in our book, you referenced that you have reached out to the cities to ask them to consider working with the county cooperatively on an ordinance that would be mimicked inside or outside the city limits. How has that been received by the cities?
We've reached out to them so far. We sent them an email, let them know. We've come up with a brief draft, again, not having any direct formal direction from the board as of yet, but we have reached out to each one of the cities, let them know this is the direction we're looking to move in, dependent upon direction from the board, and made them aware. I know Major Rossborough, Chief, has spoken with some of the law enforcement officials with the other jurisdictions. Haven't heard anything formal back, to my knowledge, but I guess we continue to reach out to them. Right?
I've spoken with Chief Dorsey and Chief Porter in Hampton. I have not spoken with Locust Road Chief yet. Chief Dorsey and Chief Porter are all for it. Chief Dorsey actually said that he would wait, and once y'all decided what y'all want to do with it, that he would present it to the city council there and go. They were both all about having the same, within the same confines of a ordinance, so they wouldn't be able to jump one side of the street and kind of get away with it type thing. So they were very receptive to it.
And my assumption would be that you probably have more of these inside the city limits than you would outside.
As far as convenience store issues, yes, ma'am, we do.
Does any board member have a question or comment? Mr. Bowman?
Does this mean that the private facility will not be able to operate, or I've read it, and then I've read number 2 about the coin-operated machines, and it says, except authorized by local ordinance, no business owner or business operator shall offer more than 9, and I don't know what a Class B bona fide is, operated amusement machines for the public for play in the same location, provided, however, this limitation shall not apply to amusement or recreational establishment. Is that what the tinted window place is, an amusement or recreational establishment?
Well, I think it's been our experience where they're kind of skirting around all this. My definition of that would be something where, like, I remember years ago, I'd take my kids to these game rooms where they'd have skee ball, and, all you could win is maybe some tickets, and then you redeem those tickets for a stuffed animal, something along those lines. We don't want to affect any kind of business like that, but a business that, if we went in and looked around, was purely for, these kind of game machines, which that's one of the problems that we have with these type machines, is the way the state code reads. It talks about game of skill, and it has to be a game of skill. That's very minimal by definition when it comes down to it. So just when you've got the windows, the front of the establishment tinted out to where you can't see in, when you have to be buzzed in, and when there's no other, there aren't skee ball machines in there or anything like that, that you kind of start, going in the direction that they're just there for these illegal purposes.
Would the, gosh, it just seems like, do the judges, or does the DA, and I've heard an answer to this question that I'm fixing to ask you, but they don't really prosecute much of this when we find it. Has that been the case, or is that just hearsay? Because I've heard both ways. So.
One of the difficult things is that, and what we hope to, for lack of a better definition, target is you have the owners that open these places up, and then they might pay somebody a minimal fee that operate or sit at the door, buzz folks in, and then also pay out. What the district attorney or the prosecutor has to prove is that the owner was cognizant or familiar with this. So that's where we run into the difficulty, is making this a commercial gambling, because a lot of times it's difficult to prove, and I say prove, that the owner was familiar, because a lot of times if you have a clerk, let's call him a clerk, that's manning that station, paying out, a lot of times the owner will come in, post bond, and pay for an attorney and everything else. At least that's been my experience. So it's difficult to get to what we're trying to really get to. Hopefully this ordinance will help with that.
Commissioner, just as clarification, we have also reached out to the DA's office, let them know what we're working on, and we floated some of the drafts over their way to kind of get some input from them as well, and they've been supportive of coming up with some more stringent regulations locally that we can kind of help them on their end as well. So we have reached out to that office as well.
I know that I'd heard that we, as our undercover guys, have spent a lot of time and effort and money to bust a situation like that, only to have it basically not prosecuted by the DA, and they're unincorporated. Our county police, we're out, several $1,000s to prove whether or not it was illegal activity, only for it to walk. That was the reason, and I've heard that, but I have no firsthand knowledge of whether or not that actually took place. But I'd heard it before, and I was just wondering. We throw good money after. If this is this. When we had that teen nightclub thing, that was readily. You could really see everything that was going on with that one. With this one, it was this kind of gray area. So,
and the thing of that with the DA's office, and I've dealt with them quite a bit, is if they're running actual bona fide machines, which is a Class A and Class B machine. A Class A machine would be your skee ball or your claw machines, or not necessarily video games, but anything that you would have to do something and you get something in return, like in skee ball or a claw machine. Your Class B are your, for lack of a better, your gambling machines, your cherry machines where they spin like a slot machine, something to that effect. And it's written in the state law that if they're running a legal machine, it cannot be commercial gambling, even though they're paying out, and this, in essence, a commercial gambling operation. State law requires that you can't do it, so you have to go with the misdemeanor charge of just paying out of the machine. And like the chief said, at that point, really the only charge you have is the clerk making minimum wage for paying out. You don't have anything against the people actually running it. I think this would give us some type of leverage towards the owners because of business licenses and things of that nature to be able to do something against that when we don't have an actual commercial gambling charge, which is actually very hard to come across in a lot of these places.
Thank you.
Mr. Holder?
As far as the Class A or Class B machines, and I'm glad you defined what the difference was, do those require stickers or registration from the Department of Revenue?
This Department of Revenue requires them to have one, yes, sir.
Okay, so each machine theoretically should have a revenue sticker on it. Second thing is, I have experienced, and Chief, I believe it was before your time, I'm not sure, but I think probably everybody here on this board has had this to occur before, but the problem exists whether it's a felony or a misdemeanor. The problem is you have families that are being deprived because of this gambling situation. I had several years ago, a mother that came to me that her husband had been in one of these locations and had spent his entire paycheck. She could not buy food or anything for the kids, and this was not a made-up deal. This was for real. And she asked me what I could do. She said she had been to the local police, and they said, we can't do anything about it. And she came to see me. And I called, because we do have jurisdiction within city limits when it comes to that. And I contacted our police, and they wouldn't do anything because they said the DA will not prosecute it. Nothing will happen. And it just basically went away. And the point is, that may have gone away, but the real problem in the deprivation of families does not go away. So that is the real problem when it comes to this. I think if we got past the smoke, we'd find out that the reason the state prohibits such as that is they're not getting their taxes and it's competing with the lottery. If the truth were known, I'm sure that has quite a bit to do with it. But the problem is the families and what it does. Look what can happen when that occurs and nobody has food. What does that mean? That means your food banks. It means DFACs, means possibly the Haven House or the Friends House or many of the other services that the public has to support, has to step in.
Well, and I think this whole discussion could open up a big can of worms, starting all the way at the state level. But, and I would like to clarify something. If somebody has stepped in and said there's nothing we can do about it, I would like to clarify that. It's very difficult at this time to do something about it because we're kind of hamstrung by our own state law. And in stepping up for the prosecutor, I don't think he's ever told me personally, I'm not going to prosecute. It's just that all the requirements that it takes to prosecute, and it's very difficult, and it's actually a misdemeanor law. So, and I've actually been to these convenience stores many years ago with our assistant district attorney looking at the machines, trying to find ways that we could legitimately enforce what we had to work with through the state statute. And it was just extremely difficult to do so. And again, we expend a lot of resources in terms of money, manpower issues, and a lot of this had to be captured on videotape because of the stringent requirements required by state statutes. And that meant you had to go in carrying a bag with some kind of, and that's before the little lapel, cameras and all going on nowadays. But it was very difficult, and again, it consumed a lot of man hours and time. So I just wanted to kind of clarify that.
Mr. Preston?
Chief, the only question I have, and y'all kind of alluded to it, but I just want to clarify. I'm always worried about whenever we add any new modify rules, change rules, is the unintended consequence.
Right.
At Dave & Buster's, Chuck E. Cheese, sounds like there's no unintended consequence from businesses that we do want to have come into the community. This wouldn't have any impact on them.
No, sir, that wouldn't have any impact on those at all. Those would be absolutely, which I've never been in one of those establishments that runs the
Right.
little slot machine.
That's
why
the
it's the difference. That's why it's the difference between the Class A and the Class B. It allows for the skee balls, the claw machines, in which with a Dave & Buster's, I think it would not affect, say, the Fun Bowl that has the video games and all that type, because you don't win anything back on that. It's only machines that you actually can get a prize on. So that's what these kind of have something to do with it. It's not the Class A, which was the skee ball and all. The Class B, more or less, the gambling type machines, slot machines, those type of machines.
Okay.
So that would not affect that, no, sir.
I would like to add, and I've said earlier that I could go on and on, before the meeting this morning, I was talking to my morning watch guys, and they actually got a call last night where an individual was complaining and actually called the police saying he played the machine and he did not get paid out, and he knew for a fact that other people had been paid out at this establishment, which obviously I'd rather not divulge where that was at. But so it's pretty prevalent and still going on, almost as we speak.
Any other questions or comments? And when do you anticipate having something for us to look at?
Well, that's what we're asking for from the board. If it's your desire for us to move forward with a draft of an ordinance, we can, I imagine within the next 30 to 45 days, we can bring something back in a draft format.
Well, unless I hear any objections, I think that would be Mr. Bowman?
It is, and it may be in here and I just missed it. Is there like any square footage requirements for 9 machines? I mean, I'm thinking about 9 machines is, what are they, like 2 foot wide, 3 foot wide, or?
If that, you could probably fit 9 machines easily across y'all's podium there.
Well, that's a pretty good bit of square footage, though, in a convenience store. I've seen them, too, in a convenience store, by the way.
Right.
And the Fun Bowl, I'm kind of glad you brought that up, because, I mean, I've had my grandkids up there for parties, and
Right.
you can spend $200 or $300 trying to win 50 cents worth of
And,
tickets.
I think the part of it where you bring them out front where they have to be seen kind of stops that. Because the ones where you generally have more than 6, 7 machines, they're in the back somewhere. If it's a convenience store, they're in the back. And really, once you get over that number of machines, which is why I think the state put that in, once you get over that number of machines, you're in an establishment that's doing nothing but.
One that I know of, I mean, but they have like the state thing where they got the TV up there, and they're doing that numbers game, like Keno.
Keno.
Now,
It may be Keno, but I
correct,
mean,
the state can do Keno, a convenience store cannot.
but they got the.
As long as it's state sanctioned.
Oh, it's yeah,
Yeah.
because you
Yeah.
have to do it through the machine thing.
But like if you go to a casino, they'll have their own Keno machine going. Okay, you can't go to one of these
Well,
convenience
no, I was
stores.
talking about the state.
Correct, yes, sir.
So,
Yes, sir.
but there has to be, there's a requirement, the state requires there to be something, you can't just sit out there in the middle of the room and watch it or something, isn't it?
Right, and that's what a lot of this is, commingling of legal, not legal, and that was another thing that we're trying to do with this ordinance. We're trying to get the clandestine type activity out, out front, so to speak.
I think Commissioner Holder hit on it pretty good, though, the state's not getting their piece of it, so, because I've seen them where it didn't look like they could afford the scratching tickets, and they'd go out in the parking lot and do it and then come back in and also.
Well, and the last thing, I'm sorry to cut you off,
No,
but the
you're
last
okay.
thing that I would like to note is that we have seen, and Major Rossborough can particularly allude to this, is that we've seen a lot of other obviously illegal activities such as drugs and stuff like that seem to be circulating around these businesses. And again, if we wanted to go serve a search warrant, we couldn't just go open the door and go in. There's a lot of buzzer and one way in and one way out type activity.
Thank you, Chief.
Any other questions or comments? All right, if not, we'll just look for an ordinance to come back before us in a few weeks.
Madam Chair, thank you. While the chief's up there, this only has to do with, I went out, you guys are fine. This is something that happened in
Thank
the,
you.
on Friday. I was able to spend about 4.5 hours or so on Operation
Rolling Thunder. Rolling Thunder.
Rolling Thunder.
Yes, sir.
And I really had 2 reasons for going. One, I wanted to kind of watch it because it had so many jurisdictions involved. And I don't know how many, I'm sure, Chief, there's how many different jurisdictions?
We had, just off the top of my head, about 15 or 16.
Valdosta, was that like the furthest? Or?
Valdosta, I believe, was about the furthest away.
Yeah, and I've seen Dublin and north and
sir.
south. And I really wanted to see be honest with you, how the different jurisdictions were going to treat our citizens, you know. I know our police department, for the most part, is courteous and respectful, but I wasn't sure about, you know, the others, and just that was really one of my primary reasons. And I would like to say that everything that I observed, and I observed quite a lot. I mean, the first person that we stopped at like 6:30 or 6:45, whatever time it was DUI. And it was, I mean, you know, they were at our location. I think we had 6 or 7, but I just wanted to say that the other jurisdictions, the ones that I noted, because there were several locations, but at the location that I was at, they treated our citizens respectfully and, you know, courteously, even though there were some issues that they had to deal with. And I wanted to bring that out because I know I'd gotten calls after I got home, and I had messages, what is going on? What, you know, why we've got all these, you know, is something really bad happening? Because you got Valdosta, Athens, Dublin, and I'll leave some out, Marietta, Clayton. I mean, you know, there were so many different police officers, you'd have thought somebody came through the state doing something really bad. But anyway, I wanted to make that comment, and thank you for the opportunity.
Well,
Thank you, Chief.
I know you sent us an update on Friday night. I believe you said 16 DUIs and then recovered a stolen vehicle.
Yes, ma'am.
And numerous violations for driving without a license and without insurance. How did Saturday night go? Was it as successful as Friday night?
It was a little bit better than Friday night because we did have to deploy some assets down to Locust Grove for a little incident that happened down there. And we were actually able to conduct, and one of the things, I'm glad you brought this up, Commissioner Bowman, because one of the things this allows us to do with these added manpower is we're allowed to concentrate on larger roadways without causing inconvenience to our citizens or people passing through the county. It was a little bit better than Friday night because we had to scale down our operations on Friday night with losing some of our folks. But we were able to concentrate on 1941 and some other areas. But we haven't gotten our total count, but I think we removed almost 50, somewhere around the vicinity of 50 drunk drivers from our roadways, and some of them were pretty intoxicated. Not that any level is good, but I know that Friday night we had moved to the exit ramp, and we had a driver that came through and almost struck several of our visiting officers and came within maybe 10 feet of me, that's way plenty close enough for me. But and our officers actually apprehended that individual. There were 2 individuals in that particular vehicle. But it's an awesome event, and again, it's sponsored through the Governor's Office of Highway Safety. Our intent is purely to make our roads safer for the individuals that are out there obeying our traffic laws. It's not done to inconvenience anybody, and that's why we have the numbers. It's not to be to go into a police state, but it's to actually address issues with highways that have a large volume of traffic and get our travelers through there quickly. And yes, we did recover stolen vehicles. And one of the other things that I'm very proud of is we concentrate on these children that come through that aren't in safety seats, or if they're in a safety seat, to look and see if they're properly in this safety seat, because sometimes people just throw them in and they're not. And what we do is we educate those individuals, and I know on several occasions what we did was we saw children that were improperly buckled into these seats, which obviously there's all kinds of severe and even catastrophic consequences should they be in an accident because they're not buckled in properly. But we would actually either have them deliver a car seat before they were allowed to go on, or we were able to, in some instances, we have car seats provided to us through the state. So that's something that I'm very proud of, is that we're trying to educate the public, and because children, they don't know if they're properly buckled in, or they can't say if they're properly buckled in. But that's another thing that we're concentrating on, not just any kind of arrest or something along those lines.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for the update.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right, we're going to move on now to public comments. This is the portion of the meeting where citizens are allowed to voice county-related concerns, opinions, et cetera, that are not listed on the agenda. All persons wishing to speak for public comment must sign in with the county clerk prior to the beginning of the meeting. And you will be able to address the board for 5 minutes. We did have one individual that signed up for public comment today, and that was Mr. Hope Thomas of 3364 Old Snapping Shoals Road in Covington, Georgia, and he is here to speak on issues on the Tussahaw Creek Reservoir and Snapping Shoals on the South River. Good morning, Mr. Thomas. If you would step to the podium, please, and you have 5 minutes.
Good morning, ma'am, and good morning, Commissioners. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I'll be as brief as possible. I'm Hope Thomas from Snapping Shoals. I'm a 34-year-old resident of Henry County. I also am the owner, was the owner, of Thomas Brothers Hydroelectric until the Henry County Water and Sewer Authority purchased my property and buildings from the Henry County resident J.M. Hanger. As the Henry County Water and Sewer Authority attorney, A.J. Welch, Jr., served as the attorney for Mr. Hanger and also for the Water Authority. I was given no prior notice or any form of monetary payments for the loss of my property, my hydroelectric station, my buildings, my dam, my water rights and roadways. In the language of the street, the Water Authority, under the direction of Attorney A.J. Welch, Jr., cleaned me out. You 5 board members, I believe, appoint one each of the board members of the Water Authority. So, in my military career, you're their commanding officer. They, in turn, the 5 board members of the Water Authority, select or hire an attorney to represent them. And for some reason, for eons of time, it's been Attorney A.J. Welch, Jr. I'm here to request that you board members, the board members here, somehow or another arrange a public debate between myself and Attorney A.J. Welch, Jr. And I want to debate him on honesty or the lack thereof as it pertains to the deals that they cut at Tussahaw Creek Reservoir and Snapping Shoals. In fact, I'll go so far as to say this: the damage that he has done to me and my family, I'd like to challenge him to a duel, but I know that's against the law, and that's not possible. But I'm just at my wit's end. I've never been treated like this before in my life. I've been a 34-year-old resident of this county. I'm a veteran. I'm a taxpayer. I support my church. I give to the poor. I have never been treated so badly in all my life by a government that I was willing to give my life for at one time. Are there any questions?
Mr. Thomas, I don't have an appointee on the Water Authority Board. I know the rest of the members do. Have you had an opportunity to go before the board and to present your issues to the sitting board?
Thank you very much. I personally, since this initiated in 2008, have not had that opportunity. I guess I should have requested it. But during the process of it happening, my attorney, Ward Stone from Macon, Georgia, took my brother and myself to the Water Authority to make such a presentation or request per Judge Crumley's suggestion that we negotiate our differences. We tried to negotiate our differences. We put it in writing. But Attorney A.J. Welch said, no, he's not going to negotiate. And furthermore, he did something that I'll never forgive him for. My brother was dying of cancer, and we had to actually drag him up to the Henry County Water Authority for this meeting. And while they met in executive session, Welch made my brother sit out in the hall, and he got so sick we finally had to take him home. He died shortly thereafter of cancer. And we were treated like dogs, and I'll never forget that. I'll go to my grave holding that grudge. I have never been treated so badly by a county. Now, All of this, in my opinion, was nothing but a fabrication of lies, because Attorney A.J. Welch Jr. solicited Mr. Hanger. Mr. Hanger didn't come to him and say, I think I got a problem. He solicited Mr. Hanger. Now I'm on a roll. I'm sorry. But he solicited Mr. Hanger. And he got Mr. Hanger to say, when I bought my property in 1991 from the same man I bought mine from, that he thought he bought more property. Now, I bought my property in 1976 and 1977. I'd been there for years before Mr. Hanger ever showed up on the other side of the river in Henry County. But anyhow, I know nothing about legal matters. I'm an electrical engineer. But I wish you could read the deed that the firm of Smith, Welch, and Britton wrote for Mr. Hanger. I swear to God, Jesus couldn't figure it out. So they drug me in Henry County Court, and 3 years later, after Attorney Welch wrote an ex parte final judgment and submitted it to the court. Now, I'm not saying the court used that, but he sure submitted it. I lost. I lost everything that I just told you I lost. And I appealed it to the Georgia Appeals Court. It's cost me over $250,000 in legal fees thus far. And the appeals court could rule against me. I don't know. But I've never been in a position like this in my life. I'm telling you the truth. And if anybody doubts my testimony, put me on the stand. I've got my evidence. I can prove it. I'd like to tell you some of the deals about Tussauds Creek that I've gotten out of your courthouse, out of your records, but I'll refrain from doing that this morning, because I pray to God I'll get my day in court one day, and I'll be able to expose the people that took this county for millions. That's all I know to say. Thank you for letting me cry on your shoulder. I don't hold you responsible for anything. I appreciate the service each one of you are giving to this county, and may God bless America.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas.
Thank you.
Mr. County Manager, anything for public session?
No, ma'am.
Ms. County Attorney? Upcoming meetings and events. Tomorrow, June the 5th at 9 a.m., we have a regular board meeting. June 18th at 9 a.m. and June 19th at 6:30 p.m. we have regular board meetings. Monday, July the 2nd at 9 a.m., we have a workshop meeting. Tuesday, July 3rd at 9 a.m., we have a regular board meeting. Wednesday, July 4th, all county offices will be closed in observance of Independence Day. At this time, I need a motion to convene into executive session for the purposes of potential pending litigation, personnel, or land acquisition matters. Motion by Mr. Stamey. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Holder. All in favor? Motion carries 5-0. Into public session.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Stamey, second by Mr. Holmes. All in favor? Motion carries 5-0. I need a motion for approval of an affidavit and resolution pertaining to executive session. Motion by Mr. Holder, second by Mr. Bowman. All in favor? Motion carries 5-0. If there's no further business to come before the board, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion by Mr. Holder, second by Mr. Preston. All in favor? Motion carries 5-0. We stand adjourned.